call this meeting to order. Senate Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife. So if you're on the wrong flight, you might want to go across the hall. It's good to see everybody. It's a beautiful day in Wyoming. A lot of fresh air coming at us in a hurry. But we are here this morning to take up House Bill 19 engrossed, the corner crossing clarification bill. Mr. Chairman, it's good to see you. Chairman Byron, we're anxious to hear about the travels of this bill over on your side. And would you be willing to kind of walk us through where the bill is now?
I'd be happy to. Do we want to?
Oh, we better take roll.
Trying to keep you in line,
Yeah,
Mr.
thank
Chairman.
you. Thank you, Sue. I get all charged up, about ready to go.
It's that wind.
Boner. Senator Hicks.
Excused.
Senator Jones. Here. Senator Schuler. Here. Chairman Landon.
I'm here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Yeah, okay. Good morning, Representative. By the way, it's good to see you. Mr. Chairman, walk us in. That'd be great.
Glad we got that train back on the tracks, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Folks, this is House Bill 19, friend of the committee, came out of committee during the interim, and it did get changed over in the House just ever so slightly. I'll talk about that here in a moment. But as we know, corner crossing clarification, the meat of the bill starts on page 1 on line 14. For purpose of this section, a person does not commit criminal trespass if the person travels by foot from one parcel of land owned by a local government, the state of Wyoming, or the federal government that the person, and this is important, is authorized to access, to another parcel of land owned by a local government, the state of Wyoming, or the federal government that a person, once again, is authorized to access at the corner where the two parcels meet without physically contacting or causing damage to any privately owned land or property adjacent to those two parcels. Mr. Chairman, it continues on page 3, same exact language. And then what the House did over on the other side, we had a lot of discussions about broadening the concept and also narrowing the concept. And what came into discussion was stock animals. Those folks traveling on top of horseback and other animals. We contemplated llamas, goats were discussed. But ultimately, you know, a corner is a finite point. And we decided to amend it in and with support of the committee, and that got changed. And your engrossed version is obviously accurate, but we deleted is traveling, and we inserted travels by. We deleted without and inserted, or after without, we inserted physically contacting or. I think that's important because there was a lot of discussion during the interim about the damages on private property, you know, dragging a tow, knocking something over, stepping on. And I think that's really where the committee felt comfortable to narrow it even more. You know, I think there's been a lot of discussion about monuments, and monuments are a finite point, and Senator Jones can certainly speak to monuments in her profession, myself as well. And monuments are as small in theory as a pinpoint. Now, they're all over the state in many different forms, and many different entities can put monuments in. Specifically, licensed surveyors these days put monuments in. And we had some testimony actually on the House side about licensed surveyors, and they were in favor of where we've gone with this. And the licensed surveyor, you know, they discussed monuments don't exist all over. There's a lot of old monuments. We heard this in committee during the interim that may have been a rock that's moved. They may have been a brass cap, the most commonly known one. But I think the issue with where this could go is monuments can unfortunately be moved, monuments can be destroyed, and monuments can disappear from vegetation, that good Wyoming wind we have out there blowing stuff around. So because a monument's not there does not mean it does not exist. It is always there. And we contemplated a lot of technology. There was discussions about bringing some technology into the bill, which we resisted. But I think that it's important to understand that it is on the sportsman to know where that point is. And that's no different than a hunting area. I was thinking about this morning when I woke up and, you know, there's many delineating lines for different hunt areas. They might be a ridge line. That ridge line is not a finite point, but generally that hunter is responsible to not cross that ridge line to go chase a critter on the other side. So I think folks often get lost and get kind of buried in the weeds here on the concept of that finite point. And I think it's a lot more simple than people make it out to be. And with that, Chairman, I'll stand for questions. I think there'll be a lot of good discussion on this bill, and appreciate the consideration.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Really appreciate you being here this morning. Committee questions of the chairman, questions of what took place with the amendment or in the House? Representative Provenza, before we get started with your comments, I have a comment, and that is a real tip of the hat, first of all the work that you put in on this issue. We really honor that. And you brought that into the interim. We worked it. You've shown a lot of passion on this front. And I just wanted to tip my hat. Thank you for everything. And we look forward to your comments on where the bill's been, where it is now, and what your thoughts are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, and thank you for that. I think, I'm not going to add too much to what the chairman said today. You'll see I have just slew of papers everywhere. I spent my evening reading the 10th Circuit's decision and Wyoming Law Review on the flawed criminalization of corner crossing in Wyoming. And I know that this bill struggled to come out of committee, and we have brought some amendments that I think no one's going to tell you that they love this bill today.
Yeah.
But I think that's the unfortunate reality of trying to find a ground that works for Wyoming. I think there's some misunderstandings about what the 10th Circuit said. The 10th Circuit said that by foot is the consideration. It didn't allow for people to use ATVs to corner cross. I think you'll hear a lot from both sides today, and what we tried to do was honor the spirit of the 10th Circuit. We're trying to ensure that public land hunters and public land lovers can access the public land that they own. And what this bill does is it doesn't necessarily expand the 10th Circuit. It doesn't limit the 10th Circuit, but it provides clarification for law enforcement, which we heard during the interim was necessary because the sheriff's officer is not going to go out and pull out their 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and make a decision. They're going to look at a green books. And so this protects hunters that are lawfully corner crossing under the 10th Circuit, and it protects landowners when that is being abused. So we amended the bill to try and find that middle ground with our landowners and our hunters. And I don't think anybody's going to be happy, but I don't think everybody's extremely happy about what the 10th Circuit did, because the 10th Circuit didn't say you can corner cross in all of these ways that might be claimed. So I stand by the bill. I know it puts us in a position because nobody's happy, but we've been trying to solve corner crossing for a long time. There's over 100 years of case law on this issue. It's complicated, but I think we have found what we need to do to get started on this.
Well, again, thank you, Representative, for all your work on this and all your valuable contributions to the committee. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wondering from Representative Provenza, or either one of you actually, have you been hearing lots of comments from both ranchers and hunters where they're mystified by what can we do now? What can't we do? What have you been hearing from the public?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Schuler, for that question. We heard testimony throughout the interim about that. But yeah, there has been a lot of back and forth from both groups. And I was going to hit on that before I step off this podium. But, I think it's important to know that there are groups that will not be happy with any of this. And the good representative just alluded to that. But I think that's a sign. I think this caught people off guard, especially folks that have had, pretty much unlimited access to your public land without anyone else recreating on it for a century. And I think that's really where the heart of this bill lies. Change is hard, but you have to be bold when change happens, and you have to. And in our case, I think we have to embrace it. We have to make it the best we can, the best product we can, and move forward with it. So we've heard a lot of testimony for, a lot of testimony against, and just in recent days, even more complex discussions occurring around this concept. I think that one of the most moving pieces of testimony I heard, and it actually came from a fellow member, was people that were worried that there'd be more people on public land. That was literally what they said. I am worried, my constituents are worried that this will allow more people to access their public land, our public land. So I think that I think that is telling of the bill, and I think it's telling of the complex subject that the good representative mentioned. But yeah, I do think the producers, stock growers, ranchers, farmers, those that have these huge tracts of land that they've forever had access to without any other sportsman accessing public land. This is a hard one, and I think this 10th Circuit might have caught them off guard. And I think that the House, certainly I support and defend the House's position that they did really good work on this bill. And it's a product, I think, that, as the representative said, there's going to be people on both sides that aren't quite there yet, but this is, I think, the right direction that we should go. And with that, I'll hand it over to the good representative, or go sit down.
Follow up, Senator Schuler. Representative Provenza, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think some of the key differences when we talk about 10th Circuit versus House Bill 19, the 10th Circuit's decision was civil liability context. And what this bill does is enshrines that in criminal code that you are not going to be prosecuted under criminal statute for this if you are falling within the bounds of what the 10th Circuit said about civil.
So Representative, on that front, any concern that law enforcement will be forced to be more punitive, do you think? I was thinking about this yesterday. It's incumbent upon our sportsmen and recreationists to get to the corner. If they're off the corner, does that force the hand of law enforcement in your mind?
Mr. Chairman, I have not heard that from law enforcement. I think maybe that's a concern of sportsmen. I would need to consider the language under that lens. I think what this does is if you are not corner crossing in the spirit of the 10th, then you potentially could face legal concerns with the sheriff's deputy. But that doesn't maybe occur as much now because right now there isn't clarity in the law.
Yeah.
Right. So imagine being a sheriff's deputy, someone calls about ATV riding and you understand the 10th Circuit allows for corner crossing, but you don't know the nuance of it. And someone's riding their ATV across a corner, that would still be in violation potentially, but that officer doesn't have anything to point to write a criminal trespass ticket.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Further questions? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think part of the frustration is we're trying to play catch up, based off a lawsuit that all the parties, none of them were actually from Wyoming, including the landowner, and so the sort of behavior you hear about in that 10th Circuit, landowner putting a chain across the corner. It's just so completely foreign to my experience as a citizen, as a rancher, where we get along just fine with the hunting public. So, talk about the dichotomy between the citizen legislature, everybody gets along, I think, in real life, or at least 99% of people do. Then we come down here and we have this bill that is, causing concern on both ends. So my question is about the 10th Circuit, and it's going to be an important concept. If the goal here is to basically put what the 10th Circuit said into statute, it seems to me that the facts of the case were that those corners were clearly marked. In this case by literally a chain, but potentially, by the survey markers the chairman mentioned. So do you think that's important to incorporate into the bill if that was a centerpiece of the litigation?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Boner, I do not think it is. Great question. I'm trying to think through it real quickly, but I'm pretty passionate about markers and visible markers and the fact that those pinpoints exist without the marker. And I think that that's where certainly people would disagree with me. But we have property lines, millions of miles of property lines in our states that don't have markers. Those are still property lines. We have large national parks that don't have property lines. Those are still property lines delineating private land, a national park, BTNF, a national park in my neck of the woods. So do I think that incorporating markers into the bill strengthens the bill or is in kind of in spirit of the decision that was made in the 10th Circuit? No, I think it kills the bill. I think that it ultimately forces the hand of the sportsman. You know, I, like you, Senator Boner, and you alluded to this, 99% of people are doing this correctly, and we're in a great state that tends to be neighborly. But with that, it's on the sports person to know where that spot is, just like it's on the sports person right now to know where their hunting area is. Those hunting areas are not marked by any ropes or flags or barriers. They can be sometimes, you know, roads often delineate them or waterways. But no, I don't think that, I think that you bring something, and I imagine an amendment could be coming, but no, I think that's a attempt to continue to limit public's access to public land, because if those markers are not visible or findable, or a tree may have fallen on one, or it's somewhere where it's been blown for 80 years and the marker's covered, I don't think that should take away people's access to those parcels.
Thank you. Follow up for the chairman, or let's go to Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the question. I think one of the concerns I have about that is it potentially prohibits corner crossing where a landowner is supportive. So if there's not a marker there, from how we define markers, I can't remember what title it's in, but then is that person corner crossing when there's no marker there? And I think too, it's going to create more of a division between the landowners and the hunters, because again, I think what the 10th Circuit said is no person shall prevent or obstruct or shall combine with others to prevent or obstruct any person from peacefully entering. I think I would say it's in violation at least of the spirit of the 10th Circuit to say we're only going to allow corner crossing where there's a pin, because there's so many places where there isn't one. And so then is the state of Wyoming taking the stance and saying, oh, sorry, we haven't gone out and helped do our due diligence to put markers here, so you can't access your land. I think it could conceivably feel like a dishonest attempt to keep people from being able to access their public land.
Okay, thank you. Follow up, Senator Boner.
Right, yeah, just trying to think through how this may work in real life, and in my experience has been, people trespass even when they're hunting, and the first thing the landowner does is just ask them to leave, and they do. The sheriff gets called under Title VI when they refuse to do so. So if the landowner is okay with them being there, I just don't see any practical way of law enforcement even becoming involved. So just a lot like, like I said, I'm have a tendency to coming at this from a place of experience and less, not that the words on the paper aren't important, but, think about how this plays out in real life with trespass. And like I said, 90% of the time somebody made an honest mistake and you just correct them and they go about their way. No need for Game and Fish or the sheriff to get involved at all. So I'd just like to, remind the committee of that, especially Title VI, that's kind of a big deal. And so anyways, it just, and I do think that once again, it's important that if the idea of the bill is to incorporate what the decision was, then let's do that. And so I'm less concerned about the spirit. I'm more concerned about what they said. So see if, I guess, I don't have a question.
Care to comment, Representative Provenza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you're right. I think we're on the same page that 99% of the time, Wyomingites are going to work this out. We're good neighbors. But at the center of this case of the 10th Circuit was the Iron Bar Holdings. And the reality is we've got people that own land in this state that come here, maybe don't share the same values that we do, right? And they use ambiguity in the law to keep people from accessing their public land. And that's at the center of why we're here. And so remembering that, right, like a landowner weaponized the system to go after some public land hunters.
So Representative Provenza, I have to put in with you on this front. I do think that these last handful of decades have changed things. A lot of my sportsmen have become frustrated as more and more land is sold to big corporate entities that come in and padlock gates and don't work with the hunters. I don't think we would be here today if it weren't for that development all across our state. So, I look forward to hearing from some of those representative groups later on this morning. Any other questions of Senator Jones?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, how is this going to help a hunter or recreationist that and the landowner has put up a fence that goes right to each corner? How will this help them get access to that public property right there?
There's a hot one for you. Which one?
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Barrow.
happy to take the hot ones.
There you go. Great
Y-
question.
You know, thank you for that, Mr. Chairman and Senator Jones. That's been contemplated a lot and that's been happening. You know, on the other side of the hallway here, that was also discussed. Would this limit landowners and stockmen and women and sheep herders and cattle ranchers and, you know, horse folks to not be able to fencing is a huge issue here. And would it limit them to not be able to potentially put fence up? That is just not what happens. You know, I think that the idea being that lawfully doing it would, with two fence lines or a fence line that, you know, thinking about a checkerboard here, they'd have to get creative and people are doing it. You know, you can get a ladder and people do it that gets up over without touching that fence and allows you to not touch the other private parcels. And I think you and I agree in our line of work, you know, private property rights are so important to our state and so important to ranchers and residential landowners and everything. So yeah, I think that the concept of they can do that go ahead, put up the fence, right? I mean, that's something that is within their rights of owning that deeded parcel. And I think that, and they probably already have that for their grazing operations. So I think that there's ways to get around that, and really it lies on the sportsmen or women who are going to be doing it, and whether or not they're going to take that risk to try to figure out how to get across that corner.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I don't know if you have time to sit back for a minute and stick around, but hope you can, and if not, we understand. Same way with Representative Provenza. Thank you both. We're off to a great start in understanding where the bill is. I want to go to any of our agent. I'm looking out across to see any agency folks. I see our game and fish folks here, but I think appreciate you being here in case we have questions on your front. Unless you want to comment. Okay, all right. Well, we'll reserve for questions a little bit later. Anyone else want to testify on House Bill 19? Would anyone else like to come forward and testify on this bill? I will tell you that we're gonna do a hard stop at about 25 minutes to 10 this morning. And we do have some folks that want to testify online this morning. I hope we can get to everybody. I would ask that everybody be respectful of the fact that there are folks behind you ready to testify. We do want to try to get everybody in and get a lot of perspective on this bill. So who wants to go first? Good morning, gentlemen. Mr. McGagny, you want to lead us off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim McGaggan with the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. Mr. Chairman, fundamentally, we would support legislation that puts in the statute basically what the decision of the 10th Circuit was. I think that would be useful to our law enforcement agencies in the state to know that they're operating under state law and not being called upon to enforce a circuit's court decision that they're perhaps not even totally familiar with. So to that extent, we would be supportive of this. Our primary concern with the bill as it stands, as the way it came over, the engrossed version, has to do with the inclusion of state trust lands. Looking back a little bit, those lands were granted to the state to be managed to provide revenue to the beneficiaries, the schools and the other beneficiaries. Prior to 1988, there was no legal access to the public to state trust lands, even if they were totally accessible physically. They were not to be used for that purpose. In 1988, the Board of Land Commissioners, after significant discussion and debate, granted a privilege of public access to state trust lands wherever they could be legally accessed. And the choice of that as a privilege was critically important, I believe. The board discussed how they could do this because they wanted to give the public this opportunity. but that they couldn't give the public a right to it because that would be in conflict with the constitutional provisions that surround state trust lands, that they're to be managed for revenue. And this, as it was structured, provided no revenue. So they were very careful to make that a privilege that was being granted at the discretion of the Board of Land Commissioners, could be taken away at any time across the board or to specific parcels. Based on certain factors, they have taken it away on some specific parcels, but generally those lands remain available so long as they can be legally accessed. And we believe that to open state trust lands in this bill as it stands today goes beyond what's appropriate under our Constitution, goes beyond what the intention of the Board of Land Commissioners was, and that that makes the bill unacceptable to us. So that we would ask, if you move forward with the bill that codifies the decision of the 10th Circuit and not that goes beyond that to bring in other lands. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. McGagan, so you're referencing the proposed amendment that we're looking at, is that correct? The bill itself right now, right, doesn't keep people from state lands, right? If it's only if we pass this amendment?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, we would have to have an amendment that eliminates state lands. Now, the amendment you're holding up there, I've had an opportunity to look at it. I do have some concerns with that I'd like to address at the appropriate time, but whether it accomplishes that purpose. But we would be very comfortable with an amendment that just says that this section does not refer to state trust lands.
Mr. McGagan, thank you for that. And we may take up that amendment later. And my intention would be to allow folks to weigh in on the
Appreciate that,
amendment
Mr.
because it was
Chairman.
just drafted really after a visit with you yesterday. We worked, Senator Hicks joined in the effort to try to put that amendment into form. So later on, we may take that up. So appreciate it. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. McGaggan, just to follow up kind of on Senator Jones. And again, I just barely read through this amendment, but is your worry more that the state lands would be maybe degraded or affected somehow negatively by allowing folks to corner cross on that? Or are you worried more about the constitutionality of it?
Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, my primary concern is with the constitutionality, the impacts it can have potentially on other uses that have been authorized on state trust lands that are sources of revenue, whether that's livestock grazing, energy development, whatever, that the conflict there is my primary concern. As far as the impact on the land itself, because the Office of State Lands doesn't have a staff across this state to manage state trust lands, historically and continuing today, because most of these lands are leased for livestock grazing, they've relied on the grazing permittees or lessees to provide the oversight of the land, to make them aware if there were destructive activities taking place in that. And certainly, I think your point is valid that opening all those lands up could result in more of those types of impacts, which the lessees would then be contacting the Office of State Lands about, and that puts a significant additional burden on that office that is not really staffed to undertake that activity.
Thank you.
Senator Boner.
Yeah, I'm sure we can follow up on that. I mean, can you maybe just describe, say, what it takes to get an oil and gas well on a state land parcel? I mean, that's a lengthy process, something that requires the, input from the folks who are currently using the land. Ms. McGagan, can you describe the significance of that process whenever somebody else wants to come on to state land to conduct any activity, whether it be oil, or gas, some sort of energy extraction? Could you just go a little bit more detail there?
Go ahead, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
McGagan.
not sure I totally understand your question, Senator Boner, but the conflict between, say, an oil and gas development and public use, is that?
Yeah, just in general, there's a process for allowing other uses of that land and other than have been authorized by the State Board of Land Commissioners. Can you describe the leasing process for oil and gas and the way it interacts, say, with the current ag lessee.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman
ahead,
and Senator
go ahead.
Boner, you know, that's a lease, a permitted activity that has a contractual arrangement with it. And part of that process is that, say, a grazing lessee has the opportunity to provide input on those activities. If they feel that done a certain way, it will negatively impact them, they can work with the Office of State Lands, most often with the energy companies themselves, and make appropriate adjustments to that. And because that is a formal process, it's not just someone going out there and doing something. It's quite different than if it's just the public going out there. And particularly with state lands, if I might, Mr. Chairman, because unlike the federal lands, we do have some instances, particularly in northeastern Wyoming, of fairly isolated small parcels of federal lands intermingled with private lands. But for the most part, the federal lands in the state are larger parcels. And state trust lands are often very small parcels, 160, 320 acres, surrounded by private land that have been used and leased to that same private landowner for over a century in many cases. And so the problem is multiplied when you bring state trust lands in here because of the diversity of parcels and their greater intermingling with private lands than is the case with federal lands.
Thank you for that. Follow-up, Senator Boner. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. McGagnon, the way you've constructed or discussed is strictly with state trust lands, and there's a lot of other state entities out there that own state lands. And so was it your intent just to focus only on the institutional or the lands that we acquired as an active admission? Because we have state parks, we've got water development that has grazing leases on some of their lands, we've got YDOT lands, we've got all kinds of these other state lands out there that are not trust lands, but they belong to the state. Typically, those agencies set their own rules and regulations on there. And was it your intent not to include those? Because again, I agree with you that this federal court ruling dealt specifically with federal lands. And so would it be the position of your organization to include those other state lands or to exclude them just to those, what we would call trust lands?
Mr. McGagnon, as you can tell, we thought maybe the intent was to include all state lands, but go ahead and answer.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, our intent, and we had drafted a simple one sentence amendment to that, was to exclude state trust lands because of the specific factors I've been talking about. As to those other lands, as you've pointed out, there are different state agencies that control those lands. And I think each of those agencies have the ability to put limitations on as they deem appropriate, whether this particular parcel of land is open to the public or there's reasons that it's not. And many of those are, state parks and game and fish that it makes sense that they're open to the public. But if they have parcels that they think are inconsistent with the use they're making of them, then I believe those agencies have that discretion. So our intent was to focus on the state trust lands.
Follow up, Senator Hicks.
No, Mr. Chairman, I just, what we could potentially end up with is just a multiple hodgepodge of different rules and regulations without providing guidance to those other state trust lands too, that very well may not meet the intent. In other words, it then would, if without including those, Mr. Chairman, and the members of the committee in this legislation, it could be assumed that I can just use those to corner cross on and get across. And I don't think that's what we're trying to do with this, is to make sure that we clarify the distinction between federal corners and state federal corners and which ones you can and can't use for corner crossing. And so that's what my concern is to have we got 7 or 8 different agencies have lands that could have 7 or 8 different policies. If we're going to adapt to state law, I think we should be consistent on how we implement that corner crossing provisions, Mr. Chairman. That's my concern.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Go
might
ahead,
just
comments,
briefly,
Mr. McGagnon?
certainly wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, our preference, as I stated at the beginning, is that this law reflect only what the 10th Circuit did. So it would be limited to federal lands. That would certainly be our preference. But if there's we would eliminate all state lands, let their agencies deal with those. We'd certainly eliminate local government lands because those should be at the discretion of those local governments. So that would certainly be our preference. But if the committee's desire or the legislature's desire is to be broader than that, then our primary focus is on the state trust lands.
So, Mr. McGagn, oh, go ahead, Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. McGagna. So if a rancher has a lease on some state land, do those leases read that they have the sole use of that land? Or could you explain to us exactly how most of those leases read? So if we were giving people access to that land, will we be violating the lease between the rancher and the state of Wyoming?
Go ahead, Mr. McGagn.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, no, it doesn't give them exclusive use. I don't think you'll be violating the lease by doing that because the lease gives them exclusive use for whatever purpose the lease is issued, whether it's grazing or wind farm or an energy activity, whatever that may be. It's exclusive use for that purpose, subject to whatever other uses the Board of Land Commissioners might also grant on that same land in consultation with the current lessees. So I don't see it as being exclusive or being a violation of the lease. I think it becomes obviously a potential violation of private property rights on the private land, but more importantly, it creates a whole new set of challenges to the lessee of the state trust lands and to the Office of State Lands in administering this activity. I mean, if it's a trespass on private land, then, and I'm a grazing lessee, I may be impacted not only with the trespass on private land, but with the activity that takes place on the state trust lands that have been accessed.
So, Mr. McGagn, my question just centers around the loss of access. If we were to adopt, we have two thoughts here. Your proposed amendment would simply exempt state trust lands. The amendment that you have this morning that we kind of kicked around yesterday that would include all state lands. My concern is, don't we have a lot of citizens who have access now? And if we pull an amendment like this in, what are the concerns there? I think specifically about some property up in my neck of the woods at the foot of Casper Mountain. We had the last 2 years quite a discussion about that piece of state land, which has a grazing lease on it, but it also has the ability for folks to hike and bike and enjoy that property. So if we were to pull this in, it feels like to me we might be limiting some spots across our state that are already accessible. Any thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, the language that the Board of Land Commissioners has adopted that's in their rules grants public access for hunting and fishing, public access for general public recreation, where legal access exists. So if there's legal access today, or if the private landowner grants you the right to cross the private land, that in effect, that's a legal grant. So that's a legal access. So all of those are granted today. By including the trust lands here, you're creating a broad new category of legal access that doesn't currently exist, and that's legal access through corner crossing without permission of the private landowner.
But in your mind, you wouldn't see the state lands office limiting what they already allow? If we were to adopt this language, would that change the way they look at some of these parcels?
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe it would change the way they look at them. It would certainly increase the burden that they would face, as I pointed out. But currently, frankly, the Office of State Land, the Board of Land Commissioners could decide tomorrow to close all state trust lands to public access. I don't anticipate they're going to do that, and we certainly don't advocate that. We think that there are appropriate ways to use those lands, but I think that that's a decision that is best left in the hands of the Board of Land Commissioners because they have the ability to deal with individual parcels, which is so true with state trust lands. There may be 90% of them where public access is not a problem as long as it's legally garnered. But there are a few cases. There's an example just here west of Cheyenne, where a few years back, target practice became so predominant on state trust parcels that it was interfering with the uses that had been authorized by the Board of Land Commissioners for grazing and other activities on that land. So the board had the flexibility and took the action of closing that land to public access. And that those are not typical, but there are a few of those around the state.
Yeah,
And I think that flexibility is important.
I appreciate that, Mr. McGagnon. And I'm not sure we know sometimes we don't know the unintended consequences. And I certainly understand where you're coming from with your suggested amendment, but I just got to thinking yesterday and today about what about these lands that people are enjoying now? And you certainly don't want to close that off or eliminate, the use that's going on now. And there's quite a bit of that goes on around the state, I think. So,
And I believe, Mr. Chairman, to be honest, the amendment, as I would envision it, is certainly not intended to restrict any existing public access. It's simply to say that we're not granting a new right of access through corner crossing where it didn't exist before. But
yeah.
all the ability that they have today to access that lands, whether it's through permission from the landowner, whether it's through public roadways through the landowner, or some landowners just say, given the land ownership patterns, I just don't care. You go on it whenever you want. That all of that would remain in place. This would not change any of that.
Okay, appreciate that. Mr. McGagnon, thanks. A little bit later as we work the bill, I do not have in front of me what you suggested. I think you had about 5 or 6 words to exempt trust lands, and we might lean on you to help us with that one when we get to work in the bill. Or we can take up, the other one. We'll just have
Fine,
to
Mr.
see.
Chairman, I have that. I didn't bring copies of that amendment because I knew you were working on something a little different, but I do have it with me and it's one sentence. It'd be very easy to provide it if you'd wish to do so.
We may not want to throw the blanket over all state lands. We might just want to focus in on the trust lands as you suggest, but we'll work the bill a little bit later.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Good morning. Let's go to some other testimony. Thank you for your patience. Please introduce yourself and
Absolutely.
welcome.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity
Yeah.
to speak on this bill. My name is Buzz Heddick, and I'm one of the guys that started this whole thing. My organization raised the money for the lawsuit. I've always thought that corner crossing was legal access, and I just felt in my heart that it was right. And I also don't apologize for anything that happened here. It's just common sense. When you step from one piece of public ground to the next, to me, that's legal access. That's just the way I felt about it. And that's why I put my neck on the line, doing what we did. That said, I've also been involved in some other similar access issues in Montana. And one of those was the stream access law. When that first passed, I was involved in that quite heavily. And also when a group of sportsmen sued the state of Montana to allow access to state ground. Much like what's going on here, when those bills first pass, or when those different forms of access are out there, there's a lot of people that lose their minds over what happened. There's a lot of, there's just a lot of anxiety because, like Mr. Chairman, you made a great point. Mr. Boner made another good point. We just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We're not really too sure. And what I found in both of those cases, there were issues that sprung up, but a lot of them weren't the issues that we anticipated. And then there was also a lot of issues that we were like, wow, we didn't even think about that one. And so we worked through those, mostly in cooperation with each other, with the landowners and the sportsmen. To me, that's the right way to go about this. And the reason I'm going to voice my opinion to oppose this bill is because we have not allowed that to happen yet. I think what we should do is just everybody take a breath and let's go out and corner cross for a few years, see what happens, and then come to the legislature and our legislators to solve those problems in cooperation with the landowners. Get everybody at the table. Let's just work through these things like we do in Wyoming and Montana both. And I've seen this work extremely well. But I think we're just premature here a little bit, in my opinion. And I really do think that that Wyoming BHA is right there on board with working really closely with these landowners. One of the things I heard about was where the fence corners come together. To me, that makes sense if that's a property line for that corner, for that fence to be on that corner. What I would like to see happen is where that becomes an issue, rather than pass legislation and fight about it, why don't we all get together, have sportsmen, work with landowners to build a style or whatever it takes to get across those corners so we're not interfering with their livestock and their issues there, but they're also not interfering with my right to cross there to go hunting. And to be honest with you, that's all I want. I just want to be able to go out there, corner cross and go hunting. That's it. I don't want all this other, I really don't prefer to go to court. I get it at times you have to, and that's the corner I felt like I was backed into and why I put my neck on the line for this and raised the money, donate a lot of my own money to it. I felt that passionately about it, but at the same time, we have to be respectful and we have to work together. And I don't think this bill is doing that. So for those reasons, I'm going to oppose the bill and ask that you oppose it as well. And I would stand for any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Bud. Appreciate that. I did not totally get your last name. Can you help us with?
Yeah,
it?
it's Buzz, B-U-Z-Z, and then Heddick, H-E-T-T-I-C-K.
Thank you, Mr. Heddick. Appreciate you being here.
Yep.
Questions, committee? Any
Mr. Chairman.
questions? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Heddick, glad to see you. We
Thank
go
you.
back a long ways
Yes.
over the years. Mr. Heddick, one of the questions that I want to, and you're familiar with this issue. So under the federal case, there was an established survey monument out there and then they put a ladder over the top of it and stuff like that. So, and you understand this probably as well as anybody. You understand that a GPS is not accurate within plus or minus X, depending on how many satellites you have that day. So how do you not trespass when you know that you're potentially using something? If you don't have those legally established USGS survey monuments, how do you find that exact? Because in the case that went before the federal government, it was a finite point on the land, right? It's
Correct.
and it's got a brass cap that shows you exactly where that point is. So, and I agree with you. We need to set this back a year and work on this, but how do we get to the point where we're not creating an actual permissible trespass? The discussion that we had on this bill is this, well, what's reasonable? Is it 10 feet? Is it 30 feet? Is it 100 feet on those corners that you can't find because of the accuracy? I'd like to get your perspective on that versus the federal case that said just finite point is established.
Mr. Heddick,
Yep,
go ahead.
Would you opine on that?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, absolutely. So in my day job, I use GPSs all the time, right? And I also look for a lot of corners. I'm not a surveyor, but the job I do, I'm just out of curiosity a lot of times. I've actually helped a few landowners find pins that they didn't know exist, or they knew they existed, they just didn't know where they were. And I did that with a handheld GPS. This is another point, Mr. Hicks, that I think is very important, is we're going to have to work together to find a solution to this problem with the GPSs. Because you're right, the court case was fairly specific, but at the same time, I think we have to have leeway to use the best available technology that we have in cooperation again with the landowners. And maybe down the road, this is something that we can talk about is, what do we do there? And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert. I know how to use a GPS. I know how to find the corners. A lot of times the corners are not a monument necessarily, but there still is some evidence there of a corner. It could be a rock. It could be just a metal stake in the ground. So, and it's also been in my experience, most of the corners are there. I would say a majority are there. Is there cases where they're maybe not there or people don't recognize that those corners are there? Absolutely. But I do think that if you're using the best possible technology you can, being very, very, very careful with that, I don't see where that would be a problem that we couldn't solve. Does that answer your question?
Go ahead, Senator Hicks.
Yeah, it does in a roundabout way. And so it's who's got the best technology. And so, right. And so here's my concerns. You know, I may not want to go out and buy the best GPS. And so I say I found a legal corner, and then the landowner calls the sheriff's department, and the sheriff comes out there and they pull out maybe a little higher powered GPS, and they can't agree on where the point is. And we provided absolutely no clarity then to anybody as to where that point is because, as you well know, the cost of the instrumentation refines the level of how quick and that when the monument's right, you know, whether it's a established USGS or a pin or a pile of rocks, you find those, or steel post. It was at one time there was a legal survey that found that it's when none of that exists, I think we create a major trespass problem. And then who is the duty on to be able to prove that they crossed at that corner? That's the second part of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll let you answer that one, and
Sure.
then we're gonna move on to
Yep,
some other
fine, yep,
testimony,
yep.
and great
That's-
conversation though.
Yeah, Mr.
Thank
Chairman,
you,
Senator
Senator.
Hicks, there again, I think I think we need to see what happens first. I mean, because what we're talking about again is rubbing the crystal ball, and like you're anticipating problems that in my opinion may not really be that much of a problem. And in those places where the corner maybe doesn't exist and there is a problem and there is an issue, maybe that's again where sportsmen and landowners come together. We go out there, do an official survey, get that pin in there. I just don't think it's going to be as wide a spread of problem as everybody's anticipating. It's just something new, and we just need to let it work itself out, take the temperature down a bit, and just go hunting for a while, cross some corners, and then we'll solve the problems.
Thank you, Mr. Hedrick.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Good morning. Please introduce yourself, and we look forward to your testimony. Thank you.
And my name is Guy Litt. I'm a co-chair of the Wyoming chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Coming here to speak about this bill and the amendments. We first appreciate the efforts by members in the House to craft this bill initially. Fundamentally, we're concerned about some of the new amendments that have been introduced that ignore the realities of corner crossing. And something that I think we're overlooking is that this 10th Circuit ruling hinged on the Unlawful Enclosures Act of 1885. So I'm going to talk about two different scenarios in two different court cases that ruled on corner crossing. And in these cases, they're both looking back to the Unlawful Enclosures Act of 1885. So I think we risk, if we just look at case law and just look at specific circumstances, that's all that these courts were tasked to address. And so if we only look at these specific circumstances, we risk creating law that would contradict existing federal law with the Unlawful Enclosures Act of 1885. So the first case is what happened on Elk Mountain. There were 2 years of corner crossing. In the initial year of 2020, there was a chain across the corner and T-posts on private property. And 3 of the hunters stated that they grabbed onto the T-post to swing around and cross the corner. So in that situation, they were touching private property. And Judge Skovdahl ruled in the federal district court, ruled that did not represent, that was not a problem because they did not cause damage to the private property, even though that they were touching that private property of that fence post. And that's because it violated the Unlawful Enclosures Act of 1885 by trying to prevent the public from their legal access to that land. So we, in the current amendments, there's some language specific to physically contacting. And so we're concerned that physically contacting language would be it would contradict what's already federal law. a second case that happened in the checkerboard. This goes back to the McKay versus Uinta Development Company. This was ruled by the Supreme Court in 1913. The situation there was a sheep herder who wanted to legally access checkerboard lands to graze his sheep. And this is a guy on a horse. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the sheep herder. So that in that case, this is not somebody who's traveling by foot. They're traveling by horseback, and that was ruled allowable per the Unlawful Enclosures Act of 1885. So both of these, so that McKay versus Uinta Development Company, that has been a part of the decision-making process in the Judge Skovdal's ruling. It was cited, as well as the 10th Circuit ruling. It was cited. So these aren't just one-off random court rulings. So in summary, we just want to express concern about some new amended language that contradicts the Unlawful Enclosures Act of 1885. We have to be careful when we're looking at just specific court cases to craft law in our state that could contradict federal law.
Thank you, Mr. Litt. So in your view, this bill constricts access as opposed to what we think it intends to do?
Yeah, I think rather than clarify, which is a great intent, it muddies the water on what's allowable access. When somebody touches a fence post that's obstructing their ability to cross, that's if you look at the current language in the bill, that's illegal. That's touching private, or I think the language is physically contacting. So we have to be really careful. And so to echo what Buzz pointed out, I think we'd be better off giving this some time, not proceeding with this bill. We can work on solutions locally and figure out what the pinch points are.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Litt. Appreciate it. Any other questions of the backcountry anglers? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, the Unlawful Closure Act specifically deals with federal lands. Is that correct?
I don't think I'm authorized to answer that question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Litt. Thank gentlemen, appreciate it. Let's go to further testimony. Others who would like to testify on House Bill 19. Good to have everyone here this morning. Fill up the chairs. If there's someone else, please feel free to join us up here. Good morning, ladies. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Kelly Carpenter with the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, sitting in strong opposition to this bill. The Wyoming Farm Bureau membership understands this is a tough issue to tackle. There's no question about that. Our members that call the checkerboard home have been there for generations and are proud to steward their private sections, as well as the interspersed BLM sections, through regulated grazing permits, providing valuable wildlife habitat for everybody to enjoy. We staunchly support private property rights, yet understand the purpose of access to government-owned land for non-agricultural purposes. Solutions must certainly be brought to address this problem. For example, our members have policy proposing the need to make it easier to do land swaps to block up land ownership patterns in the checkerboard in an effort to come to an agreeable solution for both sides. Our members are absolutely wanting to move forward to solve this problem. However, the focus here needs to be a collaborative approach, which we do not believe this bill is. Generally, some issues we have with this bill are the lack of defined corners for crossing points, and as Mr. Magagna mentioned, the inclusion of land not federally owned in this bill. And I would like to also, as I've been tapped by the Wyoming wool growers representative here, say they support Mr. Magagna's amendment as well. So with that, further going into concerns we have with the bill, many of our members, our private property owners in the checkerboards, have hundreds of corners, many of which are not marked. So we brought an amendment this morning to hopefully address that issue. It's been passed out. You have it in front of you, Chairman and committee. Because we see this, corners not being clearly defined as an issue. As mentioned before, the technology can differ. One landowner can say the corners in one spot, or the landowner can say the corners in one spot. Hunter might see it's in another. So we just think that that would muddy the waters for legal access as mentioned in the 10th Circuit. So as you'll see with that amendment, page 1, line 15, insert after foot. And this could absolutely be worked on in Wordsmith, but we suggested add a legally recognized and place marker that is visible. We see this because the brass caps, the USGS caps that have been mentioned, there's a standard in place for those. And it's per the 10th Circuit decision. So that's the impetus behind that amendment. So just to wrap this up, our organization believes that this bill muddies the water more than clarifying anything. And we want, we advocate for not moving forward with this bill, but instead moving forward with the solution that has all stakeholders at the table. We've seen this work well with CIGIT, the Bighorn Sheep, Domestic Sheep Interactive Working Group, and we can do it again. So with that, I will take any questions you or the committee may have. Thanks.
Senator Jones first and then Senator Schuler.
Mr. Chairman. Okay, so with this amendment, so if there is no marker there, then they would be trespassing even if they have a GPS or something and they're confident that they're at a legal corner.
Yeah.
Carpenter, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones. Not being a legal scholar, I think that's the point for this. And we would need to have law enforcement come. There would have to be an investigation. So I think it wouldn't relieve law enforcement in the way that this bill is attempting to do and clarifying. I think we could have a real trespass situation there if there isn't a legally standard marker at the corner.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Carpenter, I think the issue, you're bringing up a good issue. I've always thought the Wyoming way was the way to do things, where we just worked with each other. And I truly believe that. But unfortunately, as the good House representatives both mentioned, we have a lot of people that have moved in that bought up lots of land and don't seem to quite follow some of the Wyoming way that we've always followed. And that's my worry. And what I don't want to see is another lawsuit like, that drug on for a couple of years with somebody from out of state that apparently didn't want to work with people, even though they were out of state hunters. I just think that was all wrong. So my concern, I guess, is that, because I've had lots of questions already, people asking about, so does this mean I can do this now that, and so that's why I felt like this bill might provide some clarification, but just a little more follow-up on why you think it would muddy the waters the way it is right now with the bill and without any amendments.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Carpenter.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, great question. Thank you for that. We believe it muddies the water because there aren't the clearly defined points. There isn't clearly defined damage. I know the damage is in reference to private land. We think it's still too nebulous in some of those key terms. Understanding a lot of absentee landowners have come into the state, but I think in an effort to curtail further absentee landowners coming into the state, I know there's a lot of reasons people sell out, but I think that the nebulous way this bill goes about access doesn't help our current generational ranchers stay here, keep their livelihood going, because if they're having to chase down potential trespass because of damage, other suppositions, not saying one way or the other. We love our Wyoming hunters, absolutely. But I think it would just add another layer to their livelihoods that would just be untenable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, so Ms. Carpenter, you're familiar with legal surveys. I mean, if you and your neighbor are going to build a fence out there someplace, and you want to find actually where that property line is, you would do what? You would go hire a legal survey firm to establish that?
Ms. Carpenter, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yes.
And why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just take your GPS out there and say, you know, it looks like the fence line goes here?
Ms. Carpenter. go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, Senator, because the old adage, I believe, rings true, good fences make good neighbors and good neighbors make good fences. It's incredibly important to respect private property rights of your neighbor and for them to do that as well. So clear demarcations are critical for ranchers' livelihoods. The same could be true for cattle trespass, the whole 9 yards. I mean, without boundaries, I think it's a slippery slope to allow anything to happen.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks.
Let's keep moving on. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jess Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. And I wanted to take a moment to sort of sincerely thank the committee for this discussion. This is good legislation, in the sense of like this kind of the attention to detail, the questions raised, the persistence on taking up a topic that is incredibly controversial, and it has dominated a lot of our minds, I think, for the last couple of years as this court case has moved through. I also want to say that I think it's also indicative of like, we're at the table and talking, and this is good. That is this kind of outcome that Wyoming does, where we raise a question, it's controversial, we all chew on it for a year or two, we come and we take a couple whacks at a piece of legislation as it comes. This is part of the process that makes good law. And I'm really, really grateful for that. I will say, I don't think we're quite at the end of that process. I think there's a lot of work left to be done. I think the questions that have been raised from the previous testimonies before, I think demonstrate that while we are all here at the table, we are not all on the same page, but we are all asking for the same thing, which is given a little bit of time to continue to workshop this and to continue to work through this. And I don't mean that in the committee sense, because I do think the charge is on us. It is on us as sportsmen and on us, I would say, as landowners to, if this bill does not go forward, come back next year with something where we have also addressed all of these questions. And I will sit here and commit to that for Wyoming Wildlife Federation side. I will sit in front of you next year with a bill that I am able to spend a little bit more time supporting. Some of the questions that still remain on this bill for us and in the concern of us is around the liability. You know, it's not covering state lands. It's in the sense of like duty of care at corners, who is responsible, who is not, the damages. We don't want people unnecessarily sued for civil trespass. And there are some fundamental things in this bill around that is safety for sportsmen and landowners alike that are not quite addressed yet. Now, I think there's the other side of this too, where we're going to have to come to the table and we're all maybe going to have to hold our nose a little bit and compromise, but in the great Wyoming way. Hopefully it's something that we can flesh out before and not in a situation where we're in a budget session with cramped time. And I know the committee gave a Herculean amount of effort to get this right. And they were close. We're so close. And I'm so grateful for this kind of discussion, but it's not quite there yet. And I would say that, you know, we've made it 136 years in Wyoming. We can do 12 more months and let this work out and have a piece that we can all maybe stand in front of you and flip every one of these discussions in something of, I'm in favor of this, even if I didn't get everything. I think there's something here about how we move forward as Wyoming. And I know that the general public, you know, in the House committee discussion, there was a lot of testimony that basically said, we know it's not perfect, but we're supportive of the concept. We're supportive of the clarification. It's there in the sense of like the desire, but the nuance, how it is written, is so important because we kind of get one chance to get this right. This is not something where we want to come back and continue to amend and tweak. We want to get a really good thing right. And then maybe later down the road when different situations arise, we have to readdress it. The other thing I would say is one of the most powerful pieces of testimony from the House side was a young woman who was a brand new hunter. And she said, I'm confused. It's hard now to figure out where I'm at and what is legal and what is not. And the onus is on a hunter, and a criminal trespass charge is not a little thing. And, you know, the court tried to address in a very narrow situation, but there's a lot of questions left out there. So I think legislation in the future is warranted. I think we need to take I'm going to say a wholesale look at it. I think we do need to talk about state trust lands, and maybe there's a structure there that we put in place that makes everybody feel better, but it's not in this bill. I think there is a discussion to be had about what is legal and not legal so that the entirety of the public can approach this and be like, I know where I'm at, I know what is legal, and I know how to move forward, because the onus on the hunter is scary. And as a hunter who has occasionally like ended up, because I was watching my GPS getting real close to trespass, it's a panic. It's scary when that happens, especially if it's a landowner that isn't in good faith, although most of them are. So I would just say, if we can move forward with this and hand it back to us, hand it back to the sportsmen and to the landowners, and charge us to come to you with a solution that we can both sit down and support. Because I don't think the work is on your shoulders for interim. You guys have done it. You have raised the questions. You guys have done this incredible amount of work, and this effort and persistence and the gratitude that sportsmen have for this discussion cannot be overstated. But the charge needs to come back to us to get the work done and come to you where we can sit and all agree, or at least agree to hold our nose and agree.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that testimony. And in my experience is similar to yours. Is I think this can be worked out by all the appropriate parties instead of, you know, the legislature trying to put our thumb on the table. But the question I have, you bring up just such a valid point of the confusion associated with any hunters now is on our current trespass laws, it's the duty of the person to demonstrate they did not trespass. With the bill we have in front of us now, there's no duty to demonstrate. And so I'm just, again, do you think that adds more complexity and confusion? If I trespass, it's responsible on me, but if I'm corner trespassing, it doesn't say who's responsible for knowing. So is that part of the confusion that's interjected with this piece of legislation?
Ms. Johnson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yeah, I think that is some of it. You know, the 10th Circuit touched on it in parts where they referenced a bill passed actually a couple of years ago. I think it was Senator Crago's bill. And I can read what they said. It's a footnote 24 on page 24 of the 10th Circuit opinion in the context of describing Wyoming property law. And they say, as the district court recognized, the Wyoming legislature passed a statute by its plain text decriminalizes the hunter's conduct during this lawsuit's pendency, specific to hunters, but we're not talking about bird watchers or anything else. And so in that, you fall out of the hunting statute and then into the criminal one, where the 10th Circuit did preempt what we had on the books as the criminal law. However, again, the question here where the bill puts out is, where is that duty on to those folks? Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you both very much. Appreciate it. Anyone else in the room want to testify on House Bill 19 engrossed? We're taking up corner crossings this morning. Anyone else in the room? Okay, I'd like to go to those online. Sue, we have Dusty Porter, I think, first in line, and we'll go on to Peter Mattson, Sabrina King.
Mr. Chairman, we just have Dusty Porter.
Okay. Let's bring Mr. Porter in.
Hear me?
Good morning, Mr. Porter.
TRW. Good morning, Chairman Landon. Dusty Porter, live in Casper, representing myself today as primarily a public land hunter. My testimony today will be a cautionary one of this bill. I have some significant concerns about the bill and specifically what I have heard in some of the testimony today in regards to the removal of state lands from this proposed bill, which I do not support in any way. We keep hearing talk that state lands are not public lands, but they are. Look at Article 18 of the Wyoming Constitution, which is clearly labeled public lands. It's pretty clearly defined in there. In my opinion, if we were to remove state lands from this bill, this would make the bill completely unpalatable to sportsmen and would do the exact opposite of giving clarification to law enforcement. And I think it would throw us right back into the gray area that we just came out of last year. I'd encourage you to ask why. Why do people want to remove state lands from this bill? And I think what you're going to hear is the only reason is to restrict access. There are many state-to-state corners in our state, and removing this from the bill would result in a significant loss of access, and for me personally would impact my favorite elk hunting spot. Currently, corner-to-corner crossing is legal. We have the federal protections in place. Judge Skavdal ruled on it. You know, it was upheld by the 10th Court of Appeals. So I think that based on this, we also have to ask ourselves if removing state lands would violate the Supremacy Clause. Wanted to also comment, Senator Hicks and Senator Boner, you had asked earlier about corner markers and property lines. I think it's important to remember that most fences out on our landscape actually are not perfectly on the property lines. In fact, many are fences of convenience that go around various creeks or topography. I completely agree with Representative Byron. Even if there is not a marker, there is still a corner. Leaving the burden of proof on the sportsmen to use the best technology available to them to assist them in finding the corner when there is no brass cap, unless we are going to ask the state to officially mark every corner, which I think we would agree is probably unfeasible and cost prohibitive. But maybe a resolution would be for sportsmen to be able to nominate critical corners to be marked by the state. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Mr. Porter, thanks for taking the time. We're winding down today and winding down next week, and I'll see you back home, but really appreciate you weighing in. Any questions, committee? Thank you, Dusty. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the other two have, Peter is ready to
Okay.
join us.
Let's bring in Mr. Mattson.
Yes, hello, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Mr. Mattson, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for having me, all who are present.
Mr. Mattson, are you still there? We cannot hear you. You might have hit your mute button.
I am here. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Now we can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I am testifying today on behalf of backcountry hunters and anglers as well. I'm a co-chair, but I'm also testifying as a member of the public in opposition of this bill as it stands. I agree and echo the sentiments that the proper intent is here and really appreciate the efforts that have been made in an effort to clarify our public access to our public lands. The importance of that cannot be overstated. However, this bill does seem to provide more confusion than it does clarity, as it was intended. So I am hoping to seek opposition to this bill and asking for the chance again to take some time to get together with landowners and sportsmen and the public as a whole to come up with a better solution that does what the intent of this bill is, and that is to clearly define legal corner crossing in Wyoming on federal and state lands. And there's been a lot of talk of hunters and not so much about anglers being familiar with these corners and these processes, but these are also lands that will be accessed by the general public, and hunters and anglers are often at the front of the line in terms of public access and are more familiar than most with these systems, the GPS tools, the systems that are in place in order to access these lands. The general public is a lot less informed on those issues, and therefore the clarity needs to be reduced to a level that is understandable for everybody who is able to access these public lands, and not just hunters and anglers who have been involved with this case and other cases like it for years and years. So I am asking for the opportunity to work together with landowners and stakeholders, the general public as a whole, to come up with a better solution. And I do want to testify to the cost of getting a bill wrong. There's been a lot of really great discussion here today. I think that is evidence that this warrants further discussion. And the cost of getting a bill wrong is substantial. There are court costs, lawyer costs, lawsuits. Folks end up in jail, getting arrested. We are not a legal services organization by any means, but that's what we've been turned into over the last 5 years. I sure would like to have the time, effort, and money as an organization to take more kids fishing and hunting than fight legal battles. This is an important case and obviously warranted the efforts that we've gone through, but the cost to our organization, to Wyoming sportsmen, to legislators, to the courts cannot be overstated. There is substantial cost in getting these bills wrong, and that is one other reason I would really like to see the committee oppose this bill and give us a chance to come back with something better. And I'd be happy to stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mattson. Really appreciate your willingness to get to the table as we continue to work on this policy issue. Thank you. Any questions, committee? Okay. Do we have anyone else, Sue?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Sabrina will be joining us.
Okay, let's bring Ms. King into. Ms. King, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I think everyone has spoken incredibly well to the issue. Sabrina King and I am here today on behalf of myself as someone who's been involved in this issue for many years, and as both someone who hunts in the great state of Wyoming and also owns land in an area where people frequently use our property to access public land to hunt. So on a personal level, I understand these issues quite deeply. And I think everything, frankly, for the most part, that needs to be said has been said, which is, I agree that there is a better solution. And I think a lot of issues that are outstanding to be resolved that are just not addressed in this legislation. I think I will just name one piece that has been brought up, but maybe not addressed directly, which is on whom the responsibility lies to prove trespass. And certainly the way the laws are written, especially for trespass to hunt, it is on the part of the hunter to know the land that you are on. It is also the case that when you get into court, it is on the prosecution to show that trespass actually occurred. And I think it is worth examining in the future as this, whether it's this committee or a group of folks who are just getting together to sort of solve this issue. I think it is worth examining where the burden of proof lies, because I think there is a nightmare scenario where the hunter certainly believes that they have not trespassed because that's what their GPS tells them. The landowner certainly believes that they have. There is no marker. And to even get to a place where you can prove in court whether or not trespass happened, there has to be a survey done. I do not think that sets up a scenario in which landowners or hunters are working well together. And so I think as this conversation continues, I think examining how the burden of proof is handled in these cases might be another element that can be considered in future legislation. And with that, committee, I sincerely hope that the work continues on this. I do not think this is the right bill at this time. And I appreciate the time to be able to testify, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. King. Really appreciate you taking time this morning. Any questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. Do we have anyone else, Sue? Okay. Once again, is there anyone in the room that would like to come up and testify? Representative Provenza, would you like to come up and offer any final comments before we take up the bill? Mr. Chairman, make your way up too. You're certainly welcome. appreciate both of you being here today. And so,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm
Mr.
gonna hop
Chairman,
in
go
line
ahead, you
because
start, and then we'll let
We'll-
Ms. Provenza. back
that's the
clean up.
last racehorse we want in the race, certainly Representative Provenza, not myself. You know, I guess I would just, committee, thank you for the last hour and a half. I would say that if folks don't think they had a seat at the table, maybe they should re-engage with our interim topic times. We had public posted meetings. We heard a lot of testimony in the interim. We live in our communities. We talk to people. And I just am a little surprised that in the bottom of the ninth, these folks are showing up and now saying that they are willing to all participate and all be here. This was publicly noticed. It was discussed as an interim topic. It was decided on that the committee wanted to take this up in a very public way. So with that, I really do appreciate the interim joint committee working this, and I know it came through just by a hair. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I think that if I continue to talk, I may have to take a different path back up to the House. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I will say, I think the amendments are part of why we're hearing, at least from the sportsmen's groups. And I can understand the heartburn and the heartache over those. I didn't support all of those amendments. I'm a little hesitant to say that I think we should wait and talk this out, because I'm just, the temperature of public land use in the last several years has changed. I worry about just attacks on our public lands. I really do. And that includes access. So I think we've done what we can do. I think that there's conversation to be had about whether all of the amendments we put in are beneficial to sportsmen. I certainly stand here in support of sportsmen. That was the intent of bringing this. This is why I've brought this bill in the past. But I also know we're in Wyoming. And I know that we have to work together on the things that sometimes we have to hold our nose to. And I disagree that a bill coming forward, you know, we've had 136 years. We want to bring a perfect bill. I don't know that we've ever done that. And I think that we are going to have to test how this works, and we are going to have to figure out what's the right answer for Wyoming. And I think we're close. I don't love the bill, Mr. Chairman. I think that, but I think we are sitting right now here on this issue because it's come forward from the courts. We have the momentum to try to fix this right now. And if we put it off, my concern is that tempers are going to flare, because there is a misunderstanding of what the 10th Circuit did. And some people are taking it to mean something far more than it meant. And landowners are taking it as something else. If we don't do our job to clarify what that is, I'm afraid that 3 years from now, the tensions between these two groups are going to be even higher. And yeah, we might have to come back and fix something. And the technology, I think Senator Hicks is just going to get better. And that'll probably move faster than the legislature. So glad somebody's laughing. Anyway, I would ask you for your support on this, and we can look at if we need to do anything else on
We
here.
appreciate our two colleagues on the Travel, Recreation and Wildlife Committee. I was remiss, Senator Driscoll, in not allowing you to come up and offer any thoughts before we batted clean up there. Okay, appreciate that, Senator, and I apologize for overlooking. Okay, we're going to close testimony committee. What is the pleasure on this bill?
I'll move the bill.
Senator Schuler moved the bill. Discussion. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, committee, I think we're at an interesting crossroads here, as we've not had any testimony from any of the public that wants us to pass this bill. I don't know if the House committee heard something that we haven't heard, but I've also not received any emails from any of my constituents or anyone actually that's in favor of this bill. So I'm really concerned that we could pass this and actually restrict people's access and also harm the landowners at the same time, without having a bill that anyone likes. I mean, usually there's at least one side likes it and the other side doesn't, but right now I feel like we have both sides don't like it. So who are we helping? Are we helping ourselves? I don't think this bill helps me either. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of lean on the side of what the good chairman, TRW from the House side, and also Representative Provenza. I think what this bill does is it just provides clarification. Like I said, I've had questions from people already. Well, what does this mean? Can I do this now? Can I do that now? I can't tell them. I mean, I can say, well, here's what the 10th Circuit Court said. And so to me, we worked this bill as a committee bill. And I think we did involve a lot of some of the same people that testified today. I think there was good testimony. I think everybody wants clarification on it. And I look at this bill as that's what it does. It just provides some clarification. And I also agree with Representative Provenza. I don't think it's perfect. And, I haven't seen one yet. I think, it helps me basically at least tell people back home, you can do this and you're not going to be, have criminal trespass, and I think that's the issue, is trying to protect mostly hunters really on this. But I mean, I also I'm a former rancher, ranch gal. So I mean, I see both sides of every issue with ranchers and hunters. But I just think this bill, even though it's not perfect, I think it gives me a little bit of peace that I can go back home and say, well, yeah, I think you can do this now and you won't be, convicted of criminal trespass. That's where I'm at with the bill. Don't think it's perfect, but I think we worked it as a committee, and I think we heard from both sides. And so I'm okay with, I mean, it may need a little work with amendments, but I think I'm good to push forward.
Senator Schuler, thank you. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, it's always what view you come through, and I took away just the opposite of what my colleague was. And I remember the very first time we took this up, one of the things we had, my sheriff there says, I just need clarity. And I think if we've done anything, we've obfuscated clarity from the standpoint as to who's responsible to prove where the corner was at. I don't know who is it the landowners? Is it the hunters? Is it the sheriff's department? And then where's the corner? Well, you don't have a defined survey mark. How do you make that determination? And I think this is going to create havoc for law enforcement, confusion for the hunters, because you remember the testimony. It was, well, what's reasonable? Well, is it plus or minus 30 feet today because I've got 7 satellites, or is it 10 feet tomorrow because I've got 20 satellites that give me that point? And until you can define that point, I think it obfuscates and creates more problems I see potentially more issues associated with trespass violation of this, because until we being the legislature either quantifies it's within a reasonable error margin, and then whose responsibility is it to demonstrate that? This doesn't do that. So who is it? Well, let's let the courts figure it out. And that's my concern. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, committee members, very well stated. The work we do, folks, is difficult. I've been at this a while, as many of you know. I can remember at least 2 different instances, bills that I brought. It took me 3 years on those bills, and it's frustrating and it's hard. I'm proud of the work that our committee did. I really am. And I want to recognize again, the representative has kind of led the charge. And regardless of where this bill goes today, this at least is going to be a springboard into getting the job done. And I was visiting with Mr. Magagna this week, and we all know this is not an issue that's going to go away. Regardless of what happens to this bill today, it's not going away. And our job as a legislature is to pass the laws. We can hand these off time and again to the judiciary branch and rely on judges' opinions, but it's our job to pass the laws. And so I'm proud of our committee getting the bill to this point. So let's work the bill. Let's take a look. We had a couple of suggested amendments. Mr. Magagna, would you be willing to come forward and I apologize, we don't have a printed copy of what your thoughts were yesterday. That's on me. I want to make sure that that we could track in what you had in mind and at least consider and discuss your proposed amendment on the bill. I think it goes in both places, in 63303 and then over in 233305.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the
Yeah.
opportunity. I apologize for not bringing copies because we did discuss it yesterday and I thought maybe you were going to provide it to the committee, but that's just fine. My amendment is very simple. On page 2, line 8, as well as on page 3, line 14. I'll just look at the page 2 one to keep it simple. On line 8, it adds the sentence that says lands held in trust by the state are exempt from this subsection. And then page 3, line 14 does the same thing. Lands held in trust by the state are exempt from this subsection.
Sue, did you get that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Committee, does everybody understand the suggestion from Mr. Magagna? Any questions? Any thoughts? Committee, I certainly understand where our stock growers are coming from here. I've heard that in the hall as well, that there's some interest in maybe exempting at least state trust lands. The amendment that Senator Hicks and I looked at and developed, it goes a little further than that. This one simply is the trust lands. Testimony this morning, at least from one of my sportsmen, has some real concerns about that. And I don't have an answer to the question of what does that do to lands that are already accessible. So committee, that's my only concern with this one. Any other thoughts? Does anyone want to move this amendment?
Mr. Chairman, just a little thoughts, and I
Okay.
agree with the concept, but I have a number of other agency-owned lands in our state, and they are surrounded by federal, state, it's mixed ownership, and I guess I want to include all state lands, and again, it gets back to this does not overturn existing state policy or anything, but it sets parameters for all state lands. But would have to go back to the agency. In this case, the land board sets the policy if we do this anyway. So again, Mr. Chairman, I agree with the concept. I'd just like to see it a little bit broader and bring in some of the existing statutes we have in the bill. So again, the concept I think is spot on. It's the devil's in the details, Mr. Chairman.
One more time, any interest in a motion on this suggested amendment? Okay. Let's take a look at that amendment, Senator Hicks. It takes Mr. Magagna's suggestion and fleshes it out a little bit. Would you be willing to walk us through this proposed amendment? And if you don't have a copy of it, there were some extra copies here. I think, Sue, do you still have a couple of copies? If anyone would like to get one to take a look at. Go ahead, Senator Hicks, do you mind?
Yeah, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, just real quick, it goes into both subsections in here within the bill, and it's just conforming so that they're going to be the same, just similar to Mr. Magagna's. It just says the lands owned by the state of Wyoming to which a person is authorized to access. So that comes back to either the state land board rules or the agency that owns those lands, whether it be WYDOT, they may want to restrict access for certain purposes, Water Development Commission, state parks. It would roll those in, and so it already grandfathers in those existing rules and regulations adopted by those as far as public access. And then it gets to also it has to already have legal access. So the state or any of its agencies in the state that can be accessed by public roads, public rights of way. So this is already the grant of public access that exists as it does today. But to get off of those rights of ways or access points, you'd have to comply with the rules of those agencies. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's primarily the meat of the amendment. And it just says that that a person uses those lands shall comply by the rules of the applicable agencies, whether it's state parks, school trust lands, we've got university lands, we got state institution lands in your area. So it allows each one of those institutional lands to set those rules. Well, Mr. Chairman, that's what it does.
Okay, Senator Hicks, I appreciate that. Mr. Magagna, I promised you a good look at this one because we just got it developed last night or conceptualized. You said you maybe had a comment on this. You're welcome to weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would agree totally with the way Senator Hicks has described the intent of this. The thing I'll bring to your attention, perhaps I'm misreading it, I've read it several times now, given the fact that we're talking about here, it's a subsection addressing the lands that are addressed in the bill. And as I read this, and I may be reading it incorrectly, I read it as saying that if the state hasn't, some entity that hasn't granted access through a right of way, or if there isn't a public easement or permission from a private land or any of those things, that you're not granting additional access where access doesn't currently exist or isn't authorized by the agencies. But when I'm reading this, it's also reading to me that for those lands where access has been granted or where there's public roadways or that this in effect is granting the right to corner cross for those lands. And I'm sure that's not the intent, but that's the way I keep reading it when I tie it into the bill itself, that it's saying you can't corner cross where the agency or the person in charge hasn't given access, but you can corner cross even though you have other access on lands that currently have access. And it's just the way that the two sections tie together that I raised that issue. Perhaps I'm wrong, but for your consideration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gagnon. And my apologies, committee. Technically, I don't believe that we moved this amendment. We are discussing it. I don't think that's a problem to discuss it because we may not have the desire to make a motion on it, but I would entertain a motion if anyone wants to move this amendment.
Mr. Chairman, just to be consistent with our normal procedures, I'll move the amendment for discussion.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you, Senator Hicks. Further thoughts on this one?
So, Mr.
committee?
Chairman,
Go
I do
ahead,
think
Senator
Mr.
Hicks.
Jagna, I mean, it gets back to most of the testimony we had. If we're going to do it, let's get it right. If we're inclined to continue to work on this effort, I think this is a starting point because clearly the more eyes that you get to look at these and you can read in other things, I think is important. So, Mr. Chairman, I think this is an important component. If we take this this issue again, we bring this in, but at this point in time, just for the sake of expediency, Mr. Chairman, I think we ought to just lay this amendment back and incorporate it in the larger discussion moving forward.
Absent objection, we will lay this back then, which takes us, I think, to a third suggested amendment from our Farm Bureau friends. Does anyone want to move that one? Page 1, line 16. The Farm Bureau
Mr.
amendment.
Chairman, I'm not going to move it, but again, this is a conceptual amendment that I really like. I don't think this does what the proponents think it does. I think we need to strengthen this significantly, Mr. Chairman. And so with that, again, I think conceptually, I agree absolutely with this. It's just the wording and how we strengthen to make sure to protect both parties. And so again, I think that we ought to just kind of hold this one back. And Mr. Chairman, because if this does move to an interim, the one thing that I think is absolutely essential that we capture is moving forward with anything. If we want to work the bill, I've got some language as far the duty or the responsibility of who's responsible for the corner crossing. Is it the hunter? Is it the proof of the landowner? Is it the proof of the government being the county sheriff's department? I've got language for that, but you know, Mr. Chairman, again, I hate to do these on the fly as something that this important.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Senator Boner, welcome back. We have considered and laid back a couple of amendments this morning already. We are now to the suggested amendment from the Farm Bureau. I think you caught the beginning of that conversation with Senator Hicks, and glad you're here because you are certainly welcome to move this amendment. We have not moved it. We're just having a discussion. So, Senator Boner.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I kind of alluded to earlier, I think that if the concept in the bill, as the title says, is to basically take what the court did and put it in statute, then this is a very basic, needs to be a basic part of the bill. As for a practical perspective, I don't know how you communicate clearly, you know, where exactly that corner is, realizing the ridiculously thin thread that we're trying to, strike here. The nail we're trying to thread here is very, very small. Arguably, it doesn't exist, right? That's why this has been controversial for 100 years now. The court said that it does exist, but it's, you're literally talking about, one corner touching the other. And so, if the bill title is going to be accurate, we have to have this amendment, as far as I'm concerned. And so that's where I'm at. That's where I've always been at since the interim. I've voiced these concerns back in the interim that we haven't really brought the two parties together. If the bill moves forward, I think this is a pretty important part of it.
So let's go to Senator Jones, and then I'll entertain a motion on this amendment. But go ahead, Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'd like to play devil's advocate here just a little bit. We've come across this issue because of landowners that don't live in the state and don't want people to access the parcels, the public land next to them. So what would keep them from removing the markers that are at their corners to keep people out then? If you remove your marker, does that mean they couldn't access it at that point?
Senator Boner.
I believe that's against federal law. I think it's about $250 fine. And so, so there's that. I think we have to contemplate that everybody's got to follow the law here, especially given the heightened scrutiny on this issue.
Real quickly, does anyone want to move the Farm Bureau suggested amendment? Senator Boner moved it. Is there any further discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator
So
Hicks.
If we're there, I have a proposed amendment to the amendment.
Okay.
Okay, a microphone, Senator Hicks, and
So, Mr. Chairman, again, I agree with this in conversations. I think it's absolutely essential you have to have this. I just want to make sure that we're saying explicitly what we think we have that's defensible and that everybody understands. And so I would go in there and after foot, I would strike the rest of that line. And so now it would read by foot that was established through a legal survey, which establishes a finite corner point with a recognizable legal survey monument.
okay, I'm going to have you go back over that again,
So
Senator.
that was established through a legal survey which established a finite corner point. So there's right there with a recognizable legal survey monument.
Sue, do you have that?
Mr. Chairman, I could use one more round. Thank you.
All right,
Okay, let's try that again. Senator Hicks.
all right. That was established through a legal survey, which established a finite corner point with a recognizable legal survey monument.
Okay, we are on an amendment to the amendment. Is there any discussion real quickly? And we are running out of time. Committee, I would just remind you, Senator Bonner,
That's a friendly amendment as far as I'm concerned.
friendly amendment? Okay, let's take the amendment to the amendment as the amendment, okay? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? I'm a no. We are back on the bill. Senator Bonner?
Did that pass?
Oh, I'm sorry, that did pass. That amendment did pass. And we are back on the bill. Further amendments to the bill. Is there anything else on this bill? Sure. From one of the fellow senators? Absolutely. Come on forward. The idea is to try to, Senator Driscoll, the idea is to try to get this
Be
right.
pretty concise and quick
I'll
about
break,
it.
I'll break.
Folks, we're talking about establishing where we're at using some type of electronic device. And as a landowner, I can tell you with me, I have no problem with people accessing the public ground that's around me and near me. Our problem has been a lot of it's unfenced and in with other grounds, and we end up with people that are a long ways away from it, feigning innocence. And mine is, the only way I know to do that would be to add a trespass piece with this. You have the device, you know where you're at. That's how you got there. That says you lose your hunting rights for 5 years if you're using it for hunting or fishing and you're trespassing. Give a distance from it. And I'm not asking for 5 feet. I'm saying, let the committee, I'll give you whatever latitude you have, 150 feet, 300 feet. But we find them all the time, a long ways away. And mine is, they know where they're at. When you have a GPS in your hand, you know you're trespassing. But you've used that corner to get into a remote area. That's probably in our area, it's probably not like you think of down in Senator Jones's area, a full section. It's probably 40 acres of federal ground that's totally surrounded. My end is, I don't mind them hunting that, but I do mind when they're a half mile off of it. And to me, the only way to dissuade this activity is to lose hunting rights. It's not a fine, because I can tell you, I know hunters that $1,000 is not a big deal if they're in a big elk area. By the way, I don't have any high dollar hunting areas, so it's not that in. But I really think this is a deal that says, look, if we're going to do this and you're going to let them kind of do it, let's make it where the penalties are enough that it dissuades them from going out there, that you're not putting the burden on the landowner to be out hunting hunters.
Yeah, appreciate
So,
that, Senator.
I'll leave you
Driscoll.
with that.
Glad to give you the latitude, and what I would suggest is, we're running out of time on committee, but if this bill moves forward and upstairs, I'd be happy to work with you on that. I think, yeah. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. Committee, anything else on this? Are you ready for a question on the bill?
Question?
Okay. Sue, would you please take roll on House Bill 19 engrossed?
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for engrossed bill, House Bill 19 as amended. Senator Bonner?
Aye.
Senator Hicks?
No.
Senator Jones?
No.
Senator Schuler?
Aye.
Chairman Landon?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 3 ayes, 2 noes.
Committee, that bill has passed our committee and it will go to the full Senate. It has a ways to go, and I would just submit to you, I don't know if we'll get there with it to help me to stay on the bill until the 3rd reading. I'm just being honest with you. But on behalf of the committee, I felt like we needed to pass this along. So thank you, everyone. We are adjourned for today.